Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in today to Film by Bike on YouTube. We've been doing our series of bike culture talks, talking to bike culture superstars from all over the world. And today we're so excited to be talking with Jonathan Maas of BikePortland.org. Bike Portland is a bicycle and transportation media outlet online with a strong focus on the Portland region, but viewers from all over the world. And Bike Portland just celebrated their 15th anniversary. So I'm so excited to have Jonathan Maas on the line today. Jonathan, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for inviting me. Good to be here.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about what the focus of Bike Portland is.
Well, the focus really is to reflect the community, whatever's happening out there regarding bicycling in Portland and the Portland region is something that I'm interested in sharing on Bike Portland, whether that's photographs of a big ride, political stories, breaking news, amplifying the work of advocates in town, doing a little bit of sort of advocacy on the side in my own sort of way. Highlighting voices from the community, having people come on, write guest articles. It's a lot of different things, so it just really, I've tried to sort of fill any holes in the community that I think need to be filled in terms of creating a cycling related resource.
That's great. And I love to think about, I remember in the early days before you started Bike Portland and you were proposing these concepts, and you were so far ahead of your time that there were many of us, myself included, who were sort of like, that's a cool idea. I don't know. Do we need that? Yeah, maybe we need that. I don't know. And you were just like, yes, I think we need this.
well,
I think I should do this. And
well, it's oh, sorry.
well, it's just neat to see that. Yes, of course we need. I mean, in hindsight, well, what was I thinking? Of course we needed something like this.
Well, it's funny you say that because before I really jumped in and did Bike Portland, I was sort of this, I had this marketing business that had some clients in the bike industry, but I was sort of becoming, as I learned about the web and blogging, I was becoming like the blogging evangelist in the bike industry before anybody in the bike shops or any bike industry company was really having an online presence or having blogs. And I remember I wrote an op-ed in Bicycle Retailer and Industry News magazine about, it was called Bike Shops Must Be Blogging. It's so cringy to think about now, but I was the one like sort of saying, everybody, you've got to get online and start doing, publishing is so powerful. You can connect people. And then it was interesting because I reached a point where I just got tired of trying to tell everybody else what to do. And I thought, well, as I got into the local bike scene and saw this neat stuff and kind of put all two and two together of like, wow, I could actually share what's happening in my backyard and in my city. What if I just became the thing and sort of demonstrated in a real way what I'm trying to convince everybody else to do? So I shut down my marketing business and stopped telling people to do this. And I just started doing it myself and modeled it that way. So that was kind of a weird wrinkle of how things all got kicked off.
Yeah, and I remember in those early days in particular, you were everywhere. You were out at every event, or you had somebody out at an event. And I loved it because the little joke we would make was, no, I didn't make it to that event, but I saw it on Bike Portland. So it was that concept that maybe I didn't make it to a really cool event because I couldn't get there for whatever reason, but I knew I could tune into Bike Portland and see a recap. And that's still the case today, but especially in your early days, I just felt like you really were just amplifying what was happening out there and giving people that chance to be connected, even if they couldn't physically go to events. And that was just a really neat way to get a glimpse of what was happening all throughout our region.
Yeah, that was the idea, just to reflect what was going on. And I think back then there was, like, in some ways, a ton more stuff happening. And that was always just the idea is to basically, instead of having the people that love bicycling have to rely on, oh, was the newspaper there? Was the TV channel there? Did somebody cover it? It was like, let's just create our own media channel, and we always have coverage for our stuff. That's kind of one of the things. I did some PR and media relations stuff before I got into this, so I sort of understood how the news ecosystem works, and I was like, wow, we could actually create our own media channel. We don't have to ask anybody to kind of cover our stuff and amplify our stuff and all the other things that comes with publishing something in one place. So yeah, that was super exciting. I used to love going to a lot more events, even like weekend rides, and then people could see the photos. That was always a big thing. They could see photos of themselves on the rides. I love doing that. I did it for a while. It got to be pretty all consuming though, because I love seeing people on weekends and doing all these after hours events, but people forget that I'm working during the day too. And if I work on the weekends and go to events, then Monday comes around and people are like refreshing the page, waiting for their latest Bike Portland content, and I'm kind of like still, you know, tired from the weekend. So anyway, I don't quite get out as much as I used to, and my kids are grown up now. I have two teenage daughters and a 9-year-old son. So I'm definitely pulled toward being home more now. But I think I kind of create a foundation in those first 8 or 9 years, 10 years maybe of being around almost everything all the time. And now what I've done is I hopefully have other people I know and trust that are at those things, or I have my ways of sort of finding out what happens out on the street now, and I can rely on people to help me know, if it's important enough to share on the site. So yeah.
I also love to see the way that in the earlier days, it seemed like there was just so much fun stuff happening, and then a few issues popped up on the landscape in our cycling world here in the Portland region, and you were the one to report on them and talk about them and dissect those topics. And it quickly became evident that you were going to have to be a lot more political than I ever envisioned what you were working on turning into. And what has that been like to shoulder that burden of really being the voice of the cycling community in the region, and taking on tackling a lot of these topics in terms of whether that's having a stance on them or just breaking them down into plain speak so the rest of us can understand what's happening with those topics?
Yeah, well, that's a very double-edged sort of sword situation. And you sort of proposed it really well there. I did not get into this thinking that I would do any kind of breaking news whatsoever. I'm certainly not a trained journalist or reporter at all. I never worked at a paper, didn't go to school for it or anything. It just sort of happened accidentally as I got to know enough people in this community who sort of trusted me. And like you said, I was around everything that was going on, and I had this platform that people started going to for information. Well, if you put those things together, it sort of follows that you would then start to share news oriented information and political or information. And I really liked it. I'm not saying I don't like it. I mean, I love that aspect of it. Some of my most memorable things I'm most proud of, my favorite moments come from doing that reporting and the sort of breaking news and the politics and the serious issues. But I do think a lot about, the cost that has and how difficult that aspect of the job is to maintain. And the fact that, I have people in this town who aren't the same, amount of friend that I used to be with them. So, I've had personal relationships that have suffered because it gets really awkward really quick when you go from somebody who's this sort of happy-go-lucky volunteer, cheerleading and amplifying everything, and everything is perfect and great. And then the years go by and you start to get, well, I started to get, cynical about things and started to really understand them more deeply and see how the decisions were made, all that sort of sausage making stuff, as they say. And it gets complicated, and people, you have to go from being people's friend or, sort of that sort of level of relationship to then serving the greater community, which needs accuracy and honesty and clarity. And then those two things often don't go together, and people feel bad about your stories. And it's not to say that I haven't made mistakes myself that did that, So anyway, this is a very complicated conversation. I mean, I just recently had a story that was really complicated to report out. And there were a lot of people on both sides of it who thought very differently about the way I handled it. So that's, kind of just part of the job. I really like it. I think it's really important, but it also has come at great cost. And it has, I could argue either way, sort of like, what would Bike Portland be like without as much of that, right? Like if it was still just more of a community site that was boosting events and that sort of thing, and didn't have sort of the hard news edge to it that it often has, and the real sort of critical advocacy project related stuff that it has a lot. I think there's a lot of people that want a lot of different things. There's a lot of people who want more serious news. There's a lot of people who just want to have fun and who get bummed out when they read serious stuff, right? So it's a thing. I just try to use my gut, use my hunch to try to understand like what tone and what kind of things people want to hear about. I try to mix the lightness with the more seriousness as much as I can. That's just part of like the publisher role. But yeah, it's a constant thing I'm trying to get better at and evolve.
I think you do a great job of it. I always tell people that I feel like you shoulder a great burden on behalf of the cycling community in the Portland region. And I know it's not easy what you do, but you bring the ideas out there, and I think you do it in a really transparent and fair and balanced way, and you're always really honest that you're just doing the best you can with the information you have. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not easy, especially because online people tend to get heated, and right
Oh
now
yeah.
emotions are high, and you're
Oh,
just but if you weren't putting this information out there, then other mainstream media may be trying to tell the same stories, and I don't think they'd be giving it the right time it deserves and the right thought and care that it deserves. And that's certainly something that you bring to the table. So, as a cyclist in the region, I definitely appreciate the great work that you do. 15 years.
I appreciate that. Thanks for saying it. It's so awesome
Yeah.
to hear good feedback like that. Thank you.
Yeah. So, how would you say that Bike Portland has influenced the transportation landscape here in Portland?
Well, I think what it's done is it's made the city and sort of government agencies' jobs a lot more difficult in some ways. We've held a lot of government staff accountable in some ways in terms of what they think the community will expect and accept when it comes to transportation projects and the parts of that project. I mean, people can imagine. I mean, like the feedback loop that they would get before Bike Portland was really had a big reach versus what the feedback loop they get now when Bike Portland is really able to dissect like a project, a transportation project. Those are two very different things. And there are a lot of people, I think, in government that love that. They love the additional eyes and stuff on their projects. And there are some that probably don't appreciate it because maybe they think, I'm editorializing it or something like that. So, it's changed the landscape in that we've created tons of more pieces of feedback for government agencies to make projects different that never existed before. It's just so many things from little things like that to where people need their bike lanes to broader questions about who's making decisions and different voices about you know some of the things people don't think about in terms of transportation, like who's doing the decision making, who's at the table, those sort of things. I mean, Bike Portland's really been at the center of some of those difficult conversations about are projects equitable, who's asking for them, from what neighborhoods, and how is the city presenting things. So it's changed the landscape in that regard. It's changed the landscape in terms of who works in the transportation landscape here. I mean, I can't tell you how many people I've talked to in the community over the years, just meeting them around town that say, hey, I was living where I was living, and I started reading Bike Portland because I thought it was so neat, all the things that were happening there. And then I moved to Portland, and now I'm a planner, or now I work at PSU, or now I work at a bike shop. Now I work. So I think it's helped sort of attract this huge brain trust of people here that love cycling and love this culture that we've created here. And that has a big impact, right? So it's one of the neatest things for me, just by being in the same place for 15 years. I've got to see a ton of people cycle through, which is really fun. I feel really proud to sort of hold that thread and hold this space in some way. And what I mean is, I know several people where, say, Bike Portland hosted something, or maybe I saw them at a party or some ride somewhere, and they were just new to town. And I sort of would maybe introduce myself because I always like to see who's there. And then years go by, I can sort of slowly see them getting sucked into a group, an activism group, or a bike club or something. And then pretty soon they're leading the bike club, or they're interning at the city, right? And then they sort of slowly get more and more involved. And that's really neat. That's really neat to know that, people had come here sort of like inspired by some of the things we're creating. And then now they're contributing to it and they're a part of it. And then they are doing things that are then being covered on Bike Portland, right? So then the whole feedback loop starts again, and then we hopefully inspire and attract other people, and it just kind of keeps going. So, I could keep going on about that, but I think in the same way, let's say if you used to like cycling, urban cycling, back when we had a thing called critical mass, you could go to any really major cycling city in America, and on that Friday you'd know where to meet. You could see the flyer at a bike shop. In sort of a similar way, if you like cycling in Portland, you can always just go to Bike Portland and find some people there, find a way to plug in, right? Find some resources that might help you go further into that love of cycling, inspire you more about it, inform, so in some ways it's similar to that and sort of changing the landscape.
And though you do have a super local focus in terms of what you're talking about and reporting on, And there's plenty of information there to report on and talk about. I know you have a global audience, and what do you hear from that global audience? Why are they tuning in? Why do they care about what's going on here in Portland? And what kind of feedback and ideas are they bringing to the table when you do hear from them?
Well, it's really interesting. When the site started, Portland was much more of a leader in this stuff, both I think in bike culture, just by the fact that we were really first because of people like you who were creating really cool things on the street around bikes. We were doing things that no other cities were really doing at that time in terms of the fun, creative culture. That was really interesting, and also the infrastructure aspect. I mean, we were doing colored blue bike lanes in the 1990s. That was really not no other American city was doing that, so we were leaders. And that was one of the things that got me really excited to do BikePortland to start, was to be able to share what I thought was really the leading city for cycling in America. I was able to play a part in hosting that and sharing it out to other people, right? And documenting it. That was really exciting for me. It still is. But what's happened so we also got a lot of people from other cities and other states and across the world who were super interested in that as well, because all of a sudden you had this one website devoted solely to that topic. And no matter where you were, you could experience that on a day-to-day basis. Like, what is life like in America's best cycling city? And back sort of in the day, let's say 5-10 years ago, I would make an argument that Portland was the best cycling city in the world, hands down, because Copenhagen and Amsterdam didn't have the cultural aspects that we have. They don't have the homemade film festival that's really become an amazing event, right? They don't have Pedalpalooza. They don't have this creative expression of cycling in those countries. So if you combine that with the infrastructure, I thought we had the best cycling city in the world. But nowadays things are a little bit different. We're not quite as far off in being in a leadership position as we used to be. But I think luckily I still have some of that audience that used to be around when we were. And so unfortunately now it's a little bit more like, geez, why isn't Portland on this list? Or, that aspect of it has changed. And I've also stopped covering a lot of, I don't cover as much national stuff as I used to. I certainly don't cover international stuff like I used to. Because again, I try to fill the void of what I think is missing, right? So when BikePortland started, I was really the only day-to-day full-time guy doing a bike blog, really to that extent that I knew of. And so I could cover all kinds of stuff because I felt a lot of stuff needed a voice. But slowly, more cities in America got bike blogs of their own. Nationally, everybody started blogging, right? So I kind of slowly receded back and really have been focusing for the last several years just on our city and region. So I don't know if that's as interesting to a global audience as it used to be. But I think what else might have made up for it is that because social media networks have now become so mature and evolved that it's really easy to keep in touch with people. It's not like you have to subscribe to their RSS feed or seek them out through a bookmark like we used to in the old days. Now it's just like, anybody who likes cycling can just follow us on Twitter with one click and get to, stay in touch with BikePortland. So it's a lot different.
Yeah, well, we've got Jonathan from Anchorage, Alaska, tuning in on the chat, and he is a bike advocate there. He says BikePortland is a total inspiration for him. So I think, if nothing else, there are those people that are tuning in just to see what's happening in a place that is such a mature cycling culture, which is really the way I like to describe what we have going on here. We're great at what we do. We still have a lot to learn. We have a lot to improve upon in terms of safety and infrastructure, but we are much more mature than a lot of other places. We have that luxury of time and having been at this for so long. So it's great to see you tuning in there, Donovan, and other folks who are in the chat window. Let us know if you have any questions for Jonathan. We have just a few minutes left here, but I'm curious to know from you, Jonathan, what you're working on right now and where you hope to be headed next. What's next for BikePortland?
Well, what's next is to try to build something of a little team and try to get more different kind of voices onto the site more often. I have had people working with me from time to time. I have had probably 3 steady employees at separate times in the last 15 years, 3 really great people who I loved having on my team. We have a couple guest people that will write every once in a while, but I'm talking about trying to find somebody who can work more steadily. And it's tricky because I can't really, afford a payroll or anything. But I do think it's super important for the health of BikePortland to, have a different voice more often on the site. I'm sort of this, stale, pale, and male guy, and I'm just posting everything all the time. And I think if you look at the comment section on the blog, it's mostly men. And so that's something I think about a lot, how to change that. But that takes a real intentional effort that I'm not necessarily as good at. So, and then I struggle with, trying to add a voice like that who can maybe write and take photos and do their own content versus, what I probably really need is like a salesperson, somebody who can come on and help develop the business a little bit more. The business is really not developed at all like it should. So that's something I'm really working on. I've had two business coaches that I can recall in the last 15 years. One recent one was really great, who I'm still trying to implement some of the things that they helped me with. But that's a constant battle I'm trying to fight in terms of like spending enough time developing the business. So because I have this 15-year sort of moment of reflection, I'm really trying to be much better about those sort of things. I'm really working on our subscriber program, which has been really great. We launched that at our last big milestone of 10 years, where we started having a program where people could subscribe for $10 a month or for whatever, how much they want. And that's been super, super great. I mean, that has really gotten me through. And without all those awesome subscribers, I would not be here right now. But I think BikePortland could do better by them. And, this kind of stuff well, but it takes a lot of care and feeding to have a program like that, with like mailing out cool stuff and finding ways to connect with people. And, I'm just trying to this year really build out the capacity because I have a lot to share with the community. There's a lot that's not getting covered that needs to be covered. I want to use my time in the best way possible. And while I love entering an event, like the event date very tediously in my WordPress thing,
Oh, no.
and I love keeping my calendar very up to date, and I'm very fastidious about where it's meeting and who's the leader of the ride, right? I like doing those things, but I think my value to the community can be spent better in other ways, and I'd love to have help on some of those aspects of the site. And like I said too, I need to really expand the sort of like, BikePortland, I don't know how to, I guess team would be the word, but to people who don't look like me and who don't, have lives like me, so that we can get, different people on the site from different racial backgrounds and economic backgrounds and stuff like that. That would be, I mean, people have no idea how much better BikePortland can be. I think about it all the time, and that's really like what I'm focused on when I'm not typing here on my keyboard.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, Jonathan, congratulations on 15 years, and thank you for your service to the Portland bicycle community to really be the voice of what's happening and to break down some of those complex topics in plain speak for people like me to understand, and to allow us to be able to just turn on our computers and see what's happening and understand what large decisions are being made within the city. People like me wouldn't know about that otherwise. So thank you for all that you do, and definitely thank you for coming on and joining us today to celebrate 15 years and talk with us a little bit more about the great work that you do.
You're welcome. Thank you for doing all your great work, Aileen. It's fun covering you through all these years.
Thanks. I always appreciate that. Thanks so much, Jonathan.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
This has been another Bike Culture Talk here on Film by Bike on YouTube. Stay tuned Thursday. We're going to be interviewing Bill Walton. He is a former Portland Trailblazer from the 70s. He led the Trailblazers to an NBA championship. He's also has been an ESPN sportscaster. Through going through recovery for physical injuries, he discovered a love of cycling. And now Bill is a huge cyclist as well as a deadhead, self-proclaimed deadhead. He's a super fun guy. And in this time of quarantine and the COVID-19 pandemic, he's realized that he has a lot of privilege to bring to the table and services that he can offer because of that privilege. And he formed a new event called Bike for Humanity, which is a virtual cycling event and fundraising event that's coming up this weekend. So join us on Thursday at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. We're going to be talking with Bill more about the event that he has planned, his time at the Trailblazers, and mostly his love of cycling. Also this weekend, it's the continuation of our Bike Movie Night series with the funny stuff. We're showing all the most hilarious movies from our archives, and we've got filmmaker Mike Vogel joining us for that event. You can always watch our Bike Movie Nights live and also in the archive. So buy tickets at any time to see upcoming shows or to watch through the shows that we've already done. You can find out more information about that at BikePortland or at filmbybike.org. If you want more information about Bike Portland, that's at bikeportland.org. Subscribe to us down below and stay tuned to know about all the upcoming interviews and events that we have here on YouTube. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.